Hey everyone, today we are revisiting Dragon Age Veilguard and going through a quick article that, well, let's not mince words here, it's pretty much rewriting the history of what happened. I started making videos around September. Dragon Age Veilguard was the first game I covered. I was around for its controversy and then I dove into the game, pouring just over 100 hours in it and doing a detailed breakdown on just how terrible it was, based solely on its complete lack of merit. Though I did not shy away from touching on sensitive topics that I deemed relevant. My first video on the channel to go big was centered on Veilguard's false notion of inclusion. It hit like 26,000 views in just a few days, and it was huge for me, especially at the time, as it was only my fourth video. I worked hard on it and the hard work paid off. Obviously, that's always a great feeling. And of course, the subscriber boost was also very good for me. This topic is going to come up a bit later today, as it is totally misrepresented in this article interviewing an actress who plays the female Inquisitor, although you may know her better from her roles as Alt Cunningham in Cyberpunk 2077 and Aya in Assassin's Creed Origins. Now, if I was a Wookiee, like the people who write articles like these, in order to be consistent with my worldview, I would have to immediately object to this actress even having a platform to speak on, as she, as a white woman, took the position of a woman of color to portray Aya, an Egyptian character. But since I'm not a lobotomite, I'm actually not going to hold that against her. Instead, let's just get right into the article. The article starts with, Dragon Age star Alex Wilton Regan has given her personal response to the backlash faced by last year's Dragon Age the Veilguard and blamed the mixed reactions on people who wanted to see the game fail or wanted to see Bioware fail. The actor who played the female Inquisitor in both Dragon Age Inquisition and Dragon Age the Veilguard told IGN that she was absolutely devastated to see Bioware's latest game fail to find a larger audience, despite mostly positive review scores from critics. We'll get to the part about people wanting to see the game fail or Bioware in the next point. I don't know much about this actress, I don't want to come off on the wrong foot here, but I'm also not going to sugarcoat it. As an actress, she doesn't know the real experience of the gaming space. Anyone can be a gamer, that's totally true. But when you're on the outside and you kinda just get home after work and you play a game, and maybe have some fan art tagged with your name on it, that is not the actual gaming space. It's a part of it, specifically its fandom within the game that she's playing and acting in, but it's just not at all the actual reality of the space. It's not even the actual reality within the wider RPG or even the narrower Dragon Age space, and this really shines through when she, a little bit later in this article, says that Veilguard is equivalent to previous Bioware games, which is just delusional. Even developers themselves, like David Gator, disagree with this point. Similarly, it's also delusional to look at the positive review scores from critics and actually believe that they're genuine or hold any water whatsoever. Again, anyone can basically be a gamer, but the experience within the space is completely different. The decimation of trust between gamers and the gaming news outlets has been extensively documented. It goes farther back than even Gamergate itself. The first Gamergate is often described as being against the bias and lack of ethics in games journalism. It's hilarious how far back this goes. It's been a thing for so long that we can look back to so many YouTube careers that began by making honest reviews of games and actually criticizing studios and publishers, doing actual games media coverage. Coverage that these official outlets were just too compromised to make. As time moved on, this has only gotten worse, and by now official games media is just an extension of these big companies in gaming. I can't believe I'm about to use the expression real gamers unironically, but here we go. Real gamers know not to trust any reviews from these outlets. In fact, they are often straight up mocked over how ridiculous they are. And hey, what a coincidence. This article is from IGN, and if you're up for a laugh, go check out IGN's preview of Arc Raiders. It's pretty funny until you realize that these people are getting paid to do this. I guess that actually makes it funnier. So yeah, all of those mostly positive reviews from critics mean nothing, because those critics have been compromised a long time ago. Games journalism has been in steep decline, with several outlets having to downsize or straight up shut down because of it. It just became game activism rather than journalism. And in game activism, some games are symbols that must be protected, while others are symbols that must be attacked. We saw that play out various times last year with terrible games games like Dustborn, Concord, and Star Wars being given that classic meme of the IGN 7 and articles protecting them, praising things about them that made absolutely no sense and completely ignoring their shortfalls, and in other cases such as Star Wars Outlaws telling people to please give it another chance. It was ridiculous. Veilguard was the holy grail of certain agendas within the gaming space last year, and as such, it needed to be protected. It needed to succeed in order to paint those agendas in good light, to present the things that they pushed as things that are in demand from us in the gaming space. All of those glowing reviews parroting utterly delusional phrases such as return to form were done so with that purpose, and not at all as an actual reflection of the quality of the game. In fact, I would say that many journalists knew that the quality of the game was at the very least not good. Certainly not good enough for the words that they were using, and potentially even so bad that they already knew that there wasn't going to be more content for this game or from Dragon Age ever again, as the IGN review suggested itself by saying something along the lines of, "Hey guys, this is a 9 out of 10, this is Bioware's return to form. However, if we never see Dragon Age ever again, at least it goes out in a high note." But even barring that whole agenda side of things, Veilguard was never going to find a larger audience. At best, this game was a mediocre action-adventure game with some optional character dialogues which reflected terrible writing and narrative choices. And by narrative choices, I mean the choices from the writers and the director for the narrative, not actual choices in the narrative, which were virtually non-existent barring a time where you pick which city to save near the start of the game, or what to do with the mayor of a blighted town if you choose to play as a warden, and which emotional avenue to take with Solus. This complete lack of choice in the actual story and in the way that your character was shaped, spoilers, you couldn't really shape anything, the dialogue options were an illusion of choice, plus the decisions to obliterate every storyline and decision made throughout the past 3 games made it so that Dragon Age Veilguard totally alienated its core audience and the wider RPG crowd. So honestly, again, this is an utterly delusional take. This actress lives in a completely alternate reality where Bioware apparently made an incredible game, and all of these critics bought and paid for by Access were actually totally genuine and unbiased in how they graded the game, and the only reason the game failed was because of bad, evil people on the internet. I feel absolutely devastated for Bioware as a studio that they got such mixed reactions to the game, Wilton Regan said of the response to the Veilguard. "I personally thought it was a really strong game. I thought it was just Bioware being more Bioware." Another thing that is quite disconnected from reality is calling Veilguard a strong game and saying that it had a mixed reaction. Obviously, there's always going to be a bit of room for subjectivity, but the truth is that Veilguard was so bad that it was even abandoned by the very people it was trying to target as an audience. If you take a step back and think about interactions surrounding the game in the past few months, you may even notice that Veilguard is a game that's been abandoned by the media. Nobody has gone much out of their way to defend its virtues or merit, or to even bring it up in general. In fact, some outlets even made some critical articles about it even back during its first month or 2 post-release. Of course, these negative things were always very encapsulated. They weren't supposed to be taken as heavy criticism, and the game was still a 9 or a 10 out of 10, but there were signs of even some game journalists throwing it under the bus very early on, even if at the same time they were still writing articles blaming the fanbase for being toxic in regards to criticism towards the game. And these days it is sometimes even used as a negative example to contrast with different games such as Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Expedition 33, or to even contrast with older Bioware games with articles such as these. Is this the end of Dragon Age? Veilguard was good, but Bioware needed an all-timer, and I'm nervous about what's next, with the tagline, 2009 Bioware isn't walking through that door. Here's another one. Dragon Age deserved better than this, with 2 full paragraphs dedicated to showing how much better Origin's writing was. I promise I'm not going to bounce around between articles too much, but this excerpt is actually really good. I have never worked at Bioware, so I can only base this on what is publicly known, but Dragon Age Origins certainly feels like it had the least amount of interference. This bleeds into the confident and layered writing that somehow juggles the fact that a player can be one of 6 backgrounds and respond to the events of the game completely differently from another, but that's only scratching the surface. Where to even begin with how genius Origins writing is? Characters can make different decisions based on what you say to them, and you have no way of knowing that is happening. You can decide the ruler of the country or have that decision taken away from you entirely depending on your earlier choices. You can accidentally fumble relationships, embarrass yourself in front of every noble in the country, or get someone killed based on dialogue options alone. So many things are working in the background. 10 years after my first playthrough, and I'm still learning new things about the game and the different paths that you can take. Here's a couple more acknowledging the game as a failure, as they should, since that's precisely the words that EA themselves used, and some others noting its bad writing and tone, often things that are compared to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Baldur's Gate 3. Now, of course, in all of these you will still find a common theme between them, where these criticisms are done with their brakes on, and with massive caveats, still trying to call the game good, or still assessing the game as the best work that Bioware has ever made. In fact, something very important to note is, again, that comment: return to form. At launch, all of these outlets praised Veilguard as the best work that Bioware had ever done, and now months later, suddenly all of these flaws exist. Suddenly writing is very important, and Dragon Age Origins was actually the one with the best writing. Suddenly now it matters that Bioware deleted all the decisions that players made. Suddenly now it matters that there was a total tone shift and a total dilution of RPG elements in trade for vapid action and exploration. And then they have the gall of writing articles like these from Vice and The Gamer on how much gamers need game journalism and how much we should go back to trusting them. Fat chance of that. Anyway, sorry for that bit of a deviation there, but I thought that it was important to show you guys this. This actress may call this a really strong game. She may even call this a game with a mixed reception, and in that moment, whoever was interviewing her may even be totally in agreement with her statement, because game journalists change their opinions depending on which way the wind blows. But the reality is much different. This game was the weakest in the Dragon Age franchise, the weakest work that Bioware has ever done. So much so that it's not even brought up as a success. It's not even consistently defended anymore. People have acknowledged how much of a dud this game has been and how futile it is to try and change the public's perception about it. They tried very hard in the beginning, but yeah, it's been such a disaster that they don't even try anymore. At most, all they can do is try to rewrite history and pass it off as some kind of video game martyr or something that was actually amazing and only failed because of hate campaigns. But deep down, normal people know that this is a total lie. All the coping and seething in the world is not going to change that. I also think a lot of people kind of wanted to see it fail or wanted to see Bioware fail because they're just really bad people on the internet, of which there are unfortunately many, as we have discovered. Hands down, the most ridiculous and tone-deaf line in the article. Again, this has been a chill video with no ill intent towards this actress, partly because my throat is kind of screwed up over the past couple of videos from a lot of shouting. But this line is disgusting. Is she seriously suggesting that people who dislike this game are just really bad people? Are you serious? How deep inside of a bubble or how utterly disingenuous do you have to be to seriously believe this? To believe that this makes someone a bad person, and to believe that there's so many of them that they managed to tank a game, a Dragon Age game, a AAA... Are you serious? People didn't want this game to fail. We have been starved of good games to play, to the point where even flawed games can now blow up and score higher in the public opinion than they usually would a few years ago, when competition and quality were so much higher in the industry that you truly needed to stand out in order to impress people and become a popular release. People are really just looking to be enamored by a new release, to sink deeply into a fictional world that offers them escapism, fun, love, immersion, and replayability would also be a nice bonus. People want heart and soul in their games again, instead of just another cold corporate product. Just look at Expedition 33's massive success, all for just delivering a wonderfully crafted game that exudes those qualities. It's not even a crazy game in concept, just a well-made one. You can't simply state that the industry is filled with bad, vile people who want games to fail while simultaneously having examples like this around. Bioware made a bad game, prioritized the wrong things, and some of those things were already visible a mile away from the marketing of the game, causing people to raise their concerns about it, many of which were labeled as ist or phobic nonsense by current and ex-Bioware developers who went on social media to insult their fanbase. I covered this in this video back then, including some extra concerning information that were making this game look like a bad bet, from articles and an interview with a playtester who leaked information about the game. There were no shortage of reasons for people to be on the back foot with Veilguard and to be rightfully upset at this disgusting behavior by part of some developers. Keep this in mind for later, it's important. You can't just label this as wanting to see a game fail. Wanting to see a game fail is what journalists did to Black Myth Wukong, where IGN mistranslated statements from the developers to paint them as misogynists. Then a bunch of other outlets ran with it and attacked the game and the studio relentlessly, running with IGN's made-up bullshit even after it had been debunked by translators online and even a Chinese content creator. Regardless of this, they still ran those stories and kept them up. They didn't remove them, they didn't apologize, they didn't edit them, nothing. They just doubled down. In some cases, they even went and fabricated more information, such as the article from .esports, which claimed that the game didn't feature any women in it. They used this as a bit of an anecdotal evidence for those claims of misogyny. Meanwhile, the game does of course feature various women. These articles were never corrected, journalists just played victim. With IGN, instead of apologizing, one of its journalists just went on social media and appealed for people to pirate the game so the studio wouldn't make any money. And even though Stellar Blade's situation is not as dramatic, I like bringing up the fact that its developers were labeled as incels that have never seen what a real woman looks like by IGN themselves, even though they have women in the development team. This is what wanting games to fail looks like, when you have literally nothing to articulate a concern with, so you maliciously make up some random shit just to try and take it down, for nothing else but petty ideological activism. And this is especially attributable to these parasites because unlike random people on the internet, they actually have a wide reach and perceived legitimacy as game news outlets. There's still people out there today that believe that those mistranslations were true. Veilguard had no shortage of issues before launch, and after launch it was even worse, as the whole game and its content was laid bare in front of everyone. And it was first and foremost a symbol of that aforementioned agenda, one that is destructive to gaming, one that ruined the Dragon Age franchise and just about anything else that it touches, because instead of placing creative freedom on top, it hinders it, it restricts it with some of the most insane load of nonsensical bullshit that I've ever seen, such as the list on screen right now. It forces developers to walk on eggshells with every damn decision possible, even down to the simplest, smallest things. It forces developers into thinking twice about writing sensitive subject matter into the story, or having the player character or companions be morally gray, or accidentally offending someone or some group or subgroup in real life with something that is now considered problematic to be said or presented. It forces developers to twist and mangle their games into being conduits for a message, to push for social impact in our real world, instead of just making one good solid piece of fictional media that relates to everyone, because it excludes no one, and because it focuses on appealing to basic relatable human values that connect us all, instead of contemporary socio-political garbage that divides us. It is ridiculous and it needs to go. Entertainment media is not just for me, nor just for you, nor just for your neighbor Frank or your cousin Melinda. It's for all of us. Does a game not personally represent you? Guess what? It doesn't personally represent me either. It's just that I'm looking for something good, something beside myself. And narcissists are just looking for things that serve them. Again, it has to go. It's damaging the industry. Veilguard attached itself to this agenda, whether because they wanted to or because they were forced to is irrelevant. What is relevant is that it was a mistake, and it straight up made it very justifiable for anyone that wanted to see the game fail regardless. Not that it was a choice or anything, it's just natural law. Bad games don't make it. I've said it in the past and I'll say it again. This whole tiring, boring, ridiculous identity and political game is not one that we wanted to play. It was dragged onto the industry, it was forced upon us, and now this is the natural pushback reaction that it has generated. We didn't want this, we didn't bring it into the space, but it's here now and it just is what it is. And now the people who put it there and their supporters will just have to put up with our resistance to it. With games like Expedition 33 being a vivid reminder for these people that their accusations of us just being bad people who are bigoted and misogynistic, who just want muscled up white males and loot chicks in their games, are total bullshit. No matter how many times they try to label us that way, it's never going to be true. Look, listen, are there sometimes some assholes here and there? Of course there are, it's the internet after all. But is it all of us? Is it most of us? Hell, is it even half of us? Of course not. And it sure as shit isn't enough of us to tank a good game. Just face the facts. The majority has spoken. Your game was just terrible. At launch, Veilguard was review-bombed online. Criticism of the game being woke centered on its inclusion of a non-binary companion character and the ability for the player to choose to be transgender. On Steam, Dragon Age Veilguard now sits with a mixed player response and with user-defined tags for the game describing it under LGBTQ+ and politic labels. For this, we'll just start with the user-defined tags first since they're simpler. The LGBTQ+ and politics labels are accurate, and we don't know who put them there. It could have actually very well been put there by people from the elusive modern audience because they often look for games with these tags in order to play them or find out if they're safe to play. It sounds utterly ridiculous and delusional that a game wouldn't be safe to play without these tags, and narcissistic as hell to only want to play a game that they can be personally catered in or represented, but it is simply the truth. You can check for this yourselves anytime by taking a browse through Steam forums. The politics label is also very relevant and accurate. Games are being made to be purposefully political, and this is also a self-admitted fact. There is no denying it. Here's a picture taken at a panel during the Game Developers Conference in 2024 where a lady, or whatever, is rallying the crowd with a presentation describing how everything is political and so games must be as well. We also see some of the biggest studios dedicating themselves to social impact and social causes. They proudly announce these on their websites and investment reports because it helps them financially. And more directly, we can take a practical example from Veilguard. Whether you agree with it or not, whether you like it or don't, whether your political views align with this or not, it is undeniable that if you have a fictional setting that is essentially medieval fantasy, you know, Lord of the Rings type of shit with magic, dragons, creatures, elves, etc., you do not have room for contemporary elements, subject matters, designs, or concepts because they will break immersion, unless they are carefully and perfectly woven into its world. Like for example, you can use religion if you're using an alternate version of medieval reality with magic, but otherwise you have to cut these kinds of things out. Even small things can cause an issue. For example, the language and writing in some of these games shouldn't use modern day terminologies. Some things that broke my immersion in the time that I was playing Veilguard were characters like Ballara and Harding using Gen Z, Millennial, and Gen Alpha terms such as yikes, oof, and other expressions, and also the kind of humor used which was done in a way that was as if it's as if it was fit to accompany with a laugh track, as if I was watching a sitcom like How I Met Your Mother or Friends or something like that. The writing example doesn't have to be political, of course, but it is a problem regardless. A general form of this in a political way comes in the shape of, for example, unusual diversity in the game world. It isn't usually a problem, especially in modern settings, but if we're talking about certain settings in the past, it can cause very big issues. An example where it's done well is Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West. The world is littered with diverse characters, even within the various tribes. And the game explains this indirectly, which is an even better way than explaining it directly, as it's simply being the way that humans were reintroduced to America from seed banks after humanity's extinction, implying that machines did it by using basic percentages. However, in worlds like The Witcher or Lord of the Rings or Dragon Age, where these worlds have borders and bordering cultures and people, to mix them all up and pretend as if that's unnatural, pretend as if that's just another day in downtown LA is unfitting and totally unnecessary. You're not going to end racism or whatever nonsense this is for by watering down world building. All you're going to do is break people's immersion and make an objectively worse product. There's a bit of this in Veilguard where a place of Tevinter is meant to actually be pretty bigoted, yet the city just looks like a progressive hub of humanity and elfendom and dwarfdom. Pretty much all the dumbs. Everyone is welcome, everyone is free, everyone is happy. Even the elves, who are supposed to be slaves. I don't know who needs to hear this, but here it goes. The world doesn't give a shit about your game. Your game means nothing next to these massive, historical and culturally charged world-scale issues. It doesn't even make a dent. The people who do give a shit about your games are your audiences, your gamers, us. So maybe start making games for us again, instead of using them as vehicles for social change. You're a game developer, for God's sakes, not a representative of the Geneva Conventions. Do your job as a developer and do it well, and you may yet actually have a lot more social impact by being able to bring a bunch of people from all corners of the world together, united by their love of this one objectively fantastic thing. Just as things like Lord of the Rings did, or various anime out there like Dragon Ball, Naruto, One Piece, Death Note, etc. Or even games like Counter-Strike, which have so many fond memories of getting locked into late night servers at like 4 in the morning with like Ukrainians, Brazilians, Americans, Indians, etc. We couldn't understand a goddamn thing that the other said, but we knew what our goal was. Rush B, suka bliat.
Homie, I tried to sneak through the door, man. Can't make it, the shit's stuck. Out of my way, son! Door stuck! Door stuck! Please! You're a genuine dick sucker!
But back to the point and to the main example, the inclusion of this non-binary character. Non-binary people are such an extremely modern thing, such a contemporary thing, and one that is so heavily charged with divisive political undertones that it is inescapable that it was a political move to add a character like this to the world and make her entire personality, story, personal gripes and personal questline related to that. Hilariously, at a point in the story, the mother of this character even comes up with a in-universe term for non-binary in the Kunari language, and the character completely rejects it, reinforcing the silly contemporary divisive term that we know here on Earth in the 21st century. One that doesn't even make sense in the world of Dragon Age, as binary, as far as I know, originates from computer language, or at least is the most well-known application of the term.
So, I'm non-binary.
Holy Jesus.
What does that mean?
It means I don't feel like a man or a woman.
If you are neither a man nor a woman, then what are you?
Non-binary. I just said, and I'm going to use they instead of she from now on.
If this is because I have criticized your dress or your manners...
It isn't!
Under the Cune, the term for one whose gender does not match the one given to them at birth was a cuniflock. Perhaps you are like that.
Why do you have to keep picking at it? Why can't you just be happy for me?
Evatosh, chakra to ebra.
So I'm supposed to struggle with who I am?
I don't think I like your fucking attitude right now, if I'm being perfectly honest.
And the same applies to the transgender option. Dragon Age is a world that simply is completely unlike ours. I will acknowledge that gender dysphoria is a thing, a mental illness that causes people great distress with their gender. But when you're talking about a world so detached from ours, a world where humanity, dwarves, elves, and other creatures in it have to deal with world-ending threats such as the Blight or literal invasions, the war between Templar and the mages, or the two tyrannical gods that just crawled out of some hole in Veilguard, I mean, come on. Respectfully, with all of this going on, there is simply no time or headspace to deal with shit like this. Especially not in the way that Veilguard deals with it. This is a world with lore that already allows for basically full gender changes to take place with blood magic. If you hypothetically had this gender dysphoria issue within the world of Dragon Age, you could just get rid of it like this. the term transgender wouldn't even be a thing. Making it one-to-one with the way that we have it in our world, the terms that we use in our world, the descriptions that we read on an average Tumblr post or random pep me up TikTok video is utterly unfitting and can only be there for a political reason as well. But the worst offense, and the one that actually caused this aforementioned criticism, was that these were not inclusions. They were deliberate exclusions. This is what I laid out in that video that I mentioned at the intro, the one exposing Veilguard's false inclusion. Inclusion would be the addition of these options, which, I will admit, would have been a problem either way because of the things that I just mentioned. With these things you need to be really good at your job, in world building, in writing, etc. in order to apply them in a way that feels natural to the setting and doesn't stand out as someone force-feeding their audience contemporary propaganda nonsense from the Harris Walls campaign. And in fantasy settings like this, it's damn near impossible to get that done. But at least Bioware and the media could have said that people were getting all up in arms because of inclusiveness, without it being the blatant lie that it is. If you're interested in the full breakdown, I'll leave the video linked in the description and the top comment. In short, inclusion is an addition, and what Bioware did was exclude various options that allowed for the creation of typical, conventional, and attractive male and female characters in trade of androgynous body types with proportions so incredibly limited that they didn't even need to add the sliders because they basically did nothing. In other words, if you wanted to create a non-binary or trans character, you had all that you needed. If you wanted to create a built-up, badass masculine man or a beautiful female with feminine proportions, you couldn't. All while Bioware was running their "inclusion is number one" bullshit racket, backed up by media articles. Inclusion is supposed to be inclusion, prioritizing some random 1% subgroup of the LGBTQ+ community while removing options for the rest of the population on the planet because of them being offensive or setting sensitive or harmful body standards is not inclusion. And if you think that I'm looking way too far into it, play the game. There's no shortage of these little political correctness nitpicks in the dialogue, many of which can be found through Tosh, like her virtue signaling about misogyny in a world where, again, it makes no sense, as the world of Dragon Age features prominent female figures. It's not like The Witcher where it's akin to our medieval reality except for the sorceresses, Lucanus and the entire Antivan Crows being unable to be actual assassins because murder for hire is wrong unless, of course, you're only taking contracts from the poor and the needy of the world, blood magic being completely watered down in the writing because the main cast could not be seen as morally grey, Tosh virtue signaling about cultural appropriation when describing what her and her treasure hunter guild do, or rather don't do, because treasure hunting is inappropriate due to taking things from other cultures. You may be thinking that I'm capping, but I'm not. This stuff is in the game via dialogues, fellas. It's very cute to just call all of this review bombing and bad people online, of whom there are so many apparently, but the truth is that none of these people could actually enter an honest and objective debate in regards to these terrible elements infesting the game and defend them. All they can do is surface level statements such as, "Oh, it was a really strong game," or "just Bioware being more Bioware." I could try as hard as I could to insult Bioware right now, and I would actually fail to be more offensive than that statement calling Veilguard the pinnacle of Bioware's identity. People were attacking the game before it was released, Wilton Regan continued. It's ridiculous. How can you judge a game, a book, a film, a TV show before it's actually released? You can't. It's an idiotic stance to take. There's really not much to be said here. This is that part where I asked you guys to remember something. Usually I would agree with this statement, but this is just not the situation. There was so much controversy and issues surrounding this game before it even released. The trailers alone were super mixed because the first one looked like a goddamn Fortnite expansion trailer or something like that, or maybe something more akin to a hero shooter trailer, which is somewhat fitting considering that the game was once supposed to have been a live service. But anyway, the story trailer landed a bit better, but not by much, as people's concerns about the art style in the first trailer were confirmed, and new concerns came up in regards to writing. Then these writing concerns were taken to a whole new level when they released the gameplay walkthrough of the intro. At the end of the day, this actress can call this an idiotic stance to take all she likes, but the truth is that people were absolutely correct. Their concerns were validated. In fact, they were exacerbated the closer we got to launch, because then we had that whole controversy with the developers coming out and insulting people with valid concerns that they just deemed invalid because who the fuck really knows, really? Isn't that just the truth of all this idiotic perceptions of what is offensive or whatever? Who knows where all this comes from? Who knows where all of this came from originally? Who the fuck really knows why a basic concern such as the look of characters has become a thing that people cannot complain about? But anyway, let's move on. Then there was that leaker who playtested the game and gave an interview at Nude's channel. The things that he had to say were very negative and most of them came true. There were also concerning interviews showing that the developers, particularly the writers such as Patrick Weeks and the director Corinne Bush, were far more concerned with sensitivity and political optics than creating an actually good game. And then it all culminated in the leaks from that reviewer that got an early copy, specifically speaking of Mr. Matty's situation where cringe-filled scenes that he had shared with his editor had leaked out to the public. They ended up being a total laughingstock. Is it our fault again? Is it us who are to blame? Are we the baddies because we laughed and mocked terrible scenes from a game with a multi-$100 million budget? What am I living at now? A convent? Like a nun? I'm supposed to shut up and not say anything? It's ridiculous to see the bubble that people like this live in, while still having the gall to talk as if they have any kind of authority or any kind of perception of what is actually going on with this game or with the gaming space in general. You're making a AAA game, a huge RPG in the previously well-regarded Dragon Age franchise, and garbage like that cookie dialogue or that coming out scene or the romance between Harding and the player or the romance between Harding and Tash or the romance between Tash and the player are the things that you can come up with? This is Bioware, for God's sake. These people created masterpieces. I'm sorry for getting a bit riled up here, but you are out of your fucking mind if you're going to turn towards the players like, oh, if you don't like this objective garbage, you're actually a bad person. Let me guess, are the layoffs our fault as well? A few short people at the top make all the decisions that set into motion the development of a bad product that fails to resonate with its own audience, let alone trying to capture a new wider one, and you fail so incredibly hard at it that your game flops like a fish and fails to meet even the minimum bar of approval, resulting in loads of developers at the bottom getting innocently fired for those aforementioned decision makers and vision holders at the top. And now the fault for this is ours as well. Ours for not buying it, ours for criticizing it, ours for being mad that the entire Dragon Age history to date has been canonically destroyed, and ours for hating to see what the AAA games industry has become, when instead what we should have done is what? Shut up and consume product? I'm sorry, big dog, what do I look like to you? Fucking Akon? What else is supposed to be our fault? In January, publisher EA said Dragon Age the Veilguard had underperformed versus its expectations by around 50%. Just days after the game's director, Corinne Bush, confirmed that she was leaving the company. Meanwhile, other Bioware staff who worked on the game were laid off. In the same month, Bioware signaled it had released its final update for Dragon Age the Veilguard with no further content announced or expected. I only ever want to see the folks from Bioware thrive because I adore them, and whatever they go on to do next, I have no doubts that their talents will be richly rewarded. We're really lucky we'll get more gold from them in the future. A slimmed-down Bioware is now working on Mass Effect 5, which currently does not have a release date. And that is the end of our article. The theme from the very first line of this article maintained itself all the way until the end, a total disconnect from actual gamers. You can enjoy video games as a hobby all you like, pop a disc into a console or boot up the PC at the end of a hard day's work, play something, have a good time, maybe watch a trailer or two, etc. But actually knowing what the hell is going on in the industry, actually knowing a game's reception, actually understanding what is going on, the perception around the game or a matter, etc. is a whole other thing, and it requires people to stand outside of themselves a little bit and look at things from the other side, something that I know that I'm not perfect at, but that I do genuinely try to do. I understand this lady's position of knowing some of these developers personally after working closely with them, some of which she has known for over a decade since Dragon Age Inquisition's development. I get that all that she wants for people that she adores is the best, but this doesn't change what happened with this game. It doesn't change that the ones to blame aren't us, and it also, honestly, does not change that when a company screws up this badly, there are going to be consequences, and those consequences are ultimately good. Someone, or a group of someone, screwed up big time. I don't know if I'm comfortable enough to say that Bioware is still capable of bringing their magic back from back when they actually created masterpieces. I've been disappointed too many times with studios that I thought were incredible and could do no wrong, who then ended up making really bad stuff, and later finding out that most of the important people on those studios that shaped those games that I loved had already left. This could very well be the case with Bioware. The team that remains there could very well be people who weren't there before or who just aren't the ones that led those masterpieces. But hey, I look at games like Expedition 33, Stellar Blade, Black Myth Wukong, First Berserker Kazan, Atomfall, etc., all recent games, and I think to myself that hey, I didn't know any of these developers and they created games that I love, so of course I'd like to be hopeful for Mass Effect 5, but what they made here with Veilguard was absolutely not gold. It was terrible. I think it was a good move to get rid of the writers who turned the game into a joke. I think it was a good move to thin down the studio a bit. The shill media shat themselves when this happened, like, oh my god, 80 or 90 developers, this is a skeleton crew, how can they even make a game like this? You don't need these many people to make a goddamn game, what the hell are you talking about? What the AAA industry needs less of is this bloat in these studios, ending up in just more red tape. So yeah, crucify me if you must, but I think the layoffs were a good thing. Were they done by EA with a good purpose in mind? This I cannot say, but the layoffs themselves are not bad. I think it was also a good move to discard the director who was more concerned with identity politics when it came to the Dragon Age franchise than actual Dragon Age itself, as was visible in her developer diary. Some like to crucify me for this too, they think that it's unrelated, it has nothing to do with the result of the game, but that's the fattest line of copium that I've ever heard. Just think about it for a second. If you have a guy running a burger shop who is far more interested in doing magic tricks with the bacon and the cheese instead of just making you a goddamn burger, you're gonna have people getting the fuck out of there, because both of these things do not match together. So yeah, more nerdy, passionate game directors, preferably ones who are avid gamers themselves, avid gamers of the genres they're working on especially, and whose biggest desires are to make the best and coolest game that they can muster, is far better than some random Tony virtue signaling about identity. I'm sorry, it just is what it is. So yeah, I support him getting rid of her, even if it was quietly, and even if she managed to fail upwards and land at the Wizards of the Coast studio, quite possibly working on Baldur's Gate 4 right now. Or hell, maybe even Warhammer 40k. Can you imagine that? The 40k Empress would shit herself. But anyway, regardless of all of this, there's always someone who made all of these decisions in the first place. Corinne Bush didn't just show up at EA's headquarters and say, I want to make the next Dragon Age and turn it into a laughingstock. Someone put her in that position. Someone watched this game get made. Every decision that was antithetical to the franchise was either approved or overseen, and it happened anyway. And in the end, that dumbass of a CEO just talked about how what screwed it up was the game not being a live service. If the game was live service, Jesus, can you imagine how much worse of a disaster it would have been? It was a take so bad that even the shill media has spoken against it. So all of this just to say that there's no guarantee that this smaller, tighter, and hopefully more focused Bioware team working on Mass Effect 5 is not going to end up making another garbage game. Either because of too much oversight nudging them in ridiculous directions, or because of not enough of it trying to save them from going down a ridiculous path all on their own. Whatever it is, Bioware cannot afford this next game to fail. If they do, I don't think that we'll be seeing more of them again. And I may be a cynical bastard sometimes, but that's something that I would rather not happen. Dragon Age is fine. I like it, but it's not a passion of mine. But Mass Effect definitely is. I would very much like for it not to end up in some box, never to be seen again, like many franchises that we know of. Although again, if I had to pick between never seeing it again and seeing a Veilguard level disaster, then I would definitely choose the former. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, giving it a like would be much appreciated. And if you really liked the video, why not join the rest of the 38% and subscribe? One way or another, I will be seeing you guys on the next video. Take care.